This video will take a deeper dive into the handout step of the LI process. We'll talk about what goes into it, how to format, and provide general tips and advice. We'll also provide an example of a handout being created. So at this point, you've been working hard doing research for your LI, you've been taking notes, and now it comes time to actually create and build your handout. A question to ask yourself before beginning this step of the LI process is what goes into a handout? An important thing to realize is that based on the type of LI that you're doing, your handout will include different information. Consult the Making LI and Suggested Resource PDF on what information to include for N1 through 9s, micros, farms, DDX, and anatomy and histology LIs. One thing you'll notice, however, is that this PDF does not include guidelines for other types of LIs you might come across in PBL. Things like behavior LIs, or maybe LIs about unpacking physical exam findings or lab values. So the question becomes, what information should I include in those types of LIs? The answer is pretty simple. Ask yourself, does the information in my handout adequately answer the question your PBL group wanted to know? It is really useful at the end of the PBL session to clarify what information should be explored in each LI. This helps to define its scope, and it'll keep your research focused and give you boundaries for what content should be covered in your handout. So just as an example, let's say this was the physical exam you were presented with during a case you were studying. During PBL, your group was a little uncertain about some of the findings in the physical exam, and they decided they wanted to do an LI on it. At this point, it is really important to clarify, what do we specifically want to know? And after talking, it turns out everyone was a little unsure about the cardiovascular exam, specifically the significance of S1, S2, murmurs, rubs, gallops, PMI, and hepatojugular reflux. So, you go on to do your research, and you're at the point of making your handout. On a basic level, to determine if you have enough information on your handout, you just need to ask yourself, does it adequately answer the questions we had in PBL? Does my handout explain what an S1 and S2 heart sound is? Can someone understand what a murmur, rub, or gallop is after reading my handout? To take what you should include on your handout just a step further, and this is something that can be applied to all LIs, is to think about case relevance. Now, there's a dedicated section for this on the handout. However, it can be useful to intersperse case relevance throughout the handout. If, for example, your LI was on risk factors for MI, it could be useful to highlight or bold risk factors that a patient had in the case you were studying. This is a great practice, and its impact is twofold. Firstly, you're providing information about some major risk factors for MI, which is very important. And secondly, you're taking this information and applying it as a means of understanding the case better. And one major benefit to this is you're processing this information from a different angle, which will ultimately help you and your group mates learn it on a deeper level. So that was a little bit about what information should be included in handouts. And this process will get easier as you make more LIs and spend more time in PBL. But in summary, be sure to consult the LI PDF. Always clarify the scope of your LI before you finish a PBL session, and always think about case relevance.
Okay, so now it's time to make a handout. So first you're going to open PowerPoint. Right now I just have the standard PowerPoint open, the sort of the normal slide presentation you would usually give. But I want to change this to be sized, so it's like a PDF document or a Word document when people look at it, and it makes it easier to take kind of notes when I'm trying to make my presentation. So I'm going to go up to Design, I'm going to go to Slide Size, go to Page Setup, click this drop down here, and I'm going to change it to Letter Paper. Then I'm going to come down here, and then right now it's sort of in a horizontal view. I want it to be like this, so it's like a handout. Click OK. I can click Scale Up if I want to. It doesn't really matter because I'm going to delete these text boxes here. So I'm going to delete these. Now I have a nice blank page. So now I'm ready to get started with my handout. So in my case, I'm going to be doing a DDX, differential diagnosis of chest pain. So first we're going to start inserting these text boxes. And because I'm in PowerPoint, I can just move everything around super easy. At first I was using Word, and that's really challenging. So I'm going to do HTTP1, put my name, I'm going to put Charles Browning. Now I'm ready to actually format the rest of my DDX. Now DDX is generally going to be in a table format, so I'm going to just go to here, make a new slide, and now I have space to actually insert my table. So now I'm going to go up here and insert a table. So now we have our table, and I like to arrange it by disease, like pericarditis, STEMI, and then most important is going to be clinical features / diagnostics, anything that can distinguish this disease from other diseases. So now at this point, we have our handout. I've split screen it, so now we can start doing the research part and taking over all the research, putting in the handout. So first, I have this chest pain DDX stat pearl. So it was kind of an intro in the beginning, but the part that I really want is going to be here, the differential diagnosis. This is great because this gives me an idea of what are the main diseases that I really should talk about. So now we're going to start listing these out. So I'm going to use text boxes and then different color fonts and bolding to help kind of organize it. And PowerPoint, again, is really cool because it makes it really easy to just drag text boxes in to help kind of add some organization, where in Word, this would be really challenging to do this type of stuff. So now we have the main components of my DDX, and I've organized everything by cardiac, pulmonary, GI, and then muscular with costochondritis. So starting with our first disease, we're going to look at myocardial infarction. So right off the top, we have an introduction here to what an MI is. So, adding things like, this is a heart attack, explaining what the disease is. So here we have chest pain. And at this stage, what's helpful is to try to be case relevant, highlighting things that we see in the case. So pressure, heaviness. We saw radiation as well. So after you fill in everything for your DDX, you can then start to use your handout as a space to make figures. So I'm going to make a new slide. And now I really want to add something to my DDX. I want to give a visual way to sort of think about a DDX for people to help learn, because a table is not super great for learning. It's a great place to store information, but it's not great for teaching. So now let's do that. So we're going to use the shape feature of PowerPoint, which is really cool. So I'm going to make some shapes. What I want to do is I want to make a flow chart. So first, I'm going to format them, get these lines black. And what's super cool about making figures in your handout is you can see a figure that you like on Amboss or First Aid or a textbook, and then you can adapt it, make it more yours. Now I'm going to insert some arrows, and then again, just changing the weight of them to make them look cool. Cap type here, make it rounded. The join type, make that round. So that way when you put them together, it's like really nice looking and stuff. We're just going to kind of play around with it. Figures like these are really easy to make, and they're super, super good for your presentation because they really help just like simplify the process. Because during this 5 to 10 minute presentation, you don't have time to explain this complicated DDX. Like, people are going to take that. But what people can learn is something like heavy, tearing, pleuritic, other. Okay, like that's not too bad. I can learn that. So now we have this finished product. And of course, I could spend more time making it a little bit more even and colorful and such. But this is a really great way to represent all of this information, this DDX, all these different types of things in a really visual way. So now when we think of chest pain, we can think of it as, is it heavy? Is it tearing? So when you're making your handout, really make it your own. When you use your handout, you can really set up your presentation. So I could take this flow chart and I can just, bam, just put it in my presentation and it's done. I have this nice big environment to make it, and then I can just put it on that smaller PowerPoint slide. So really use your PowerPoint to set you up for giving an awesome presentation.
So that was a little on what the process of building a handout looks like. We intentionally abbreviated the process for the sake of time, but we hope it helped you visualize what generating a handout looks like and how PowerPoint is a great tool for building handouts. So now we're going to transition over to some general tips and advice for handouts. We'll talk about the case relevance and key point section of the handout, handout length, building figures, and keeping your presentation in mind. The case relevance section is a point of confusion early on in PBL, but it's an important step. In this section, you should describe how the information you covered in your LI is relevant to the case you're working on. Now, I'd really encourage you to avoid being superficial in this step. For example, let's say your LI was pharmacology of atorvastatin and your case was about a myocardial infarction. Your case relevance section should not just be, I'm doing an LI on atorvastatin because our patient was prescribed atorvastatin in the case. You need to take it a step further. Ask yourself, why was the patient prescribed atorvastatin? Why is atorvastatin useful in the context of an MI? Does it reduce the risk of having an MI? Is there something about the drug's mechanism of action that might help interrupt the development of a plaque? Although this step can be challenging, it will help you synthesize the information you're learning and apply it, and ultimately this will help you learn it better. The key point section is another part of the handout you should not sleep on. This section essentially serves as the summary to your LI.
You worked hard building your handout, and now it is time to distill the most important parts of it. This step is critical because it will help you consolidate all the information you learned, and it will also help your groupmates extract the most important information in your LI. A good goal to strive for is about 2 to 3 pages per LI. This length, it'll probably vary based on the type of LI you're doing. Some can be as short as 1 page, others a few pages longer if you have an especially dense topic or use lots of pictures. One word of advice though, if you notice your handout becoming incredibly long, perhaps you're diving a little too deep into research, or maybe you need to rethink the way you are organizing information. If your handout is too long, ask yourself, is there perhaps an easier way to describe my LI? Am I maybe going down a research rabbit hole and putting low-yield information on my handout? Keeping handout length in mind will also help you with time management. If you set a length and stick to it, this can really help you know when you have done enough in your handout. Riley touched on this process during our handout example, but I just wanted to re-emphasize it because of how important it is. Generating your own figure on a topic is beneficial on so many levels, and I think it makes the process of learning information so much more efficient for both you and your groupmates. As you create a figure, you're essentially interfacing with the information you are studying in a deeper way. You're building a more nuanced conceptual framework and consolidating what you learned. And when it comes time to present, you can use that figure you made, and I promise you, it'll be much easier to walk through that than if you'd used a figure from another source. And not only that, figures are just much easier to learn from as someone reading your handout. Giant blocks of text can be a little sad to look at. Whenever you can, ask yourself if that block of text on your handout can be translated into a figure. Do it for your own learning and also for the eyeballs of your groupmates. We will have a separate video on how to present LIs in the future, but we just want you all to think about this step during the handout process. As you build your handout, you are essentially organizing your thoughts about your LI. During this step, think about how your information is flowing from the perspective of a reader. Ask yourself if there is a more logical way to set up the information in your handout. As you begin to think about how your information flows, it'll make the presentation step much easier, as you'll have a better idea about the sequence in which you will talk about things. Thanks for sticking with us till the end. We know that was a lot of information, but we hope it makes the process of making handouts a little easier. Don't forget to check out our next video on how to present LIs.